Hello and welcome back. So last time I cut the tendon on the neck to fit into the guitar, but of course I cut it a little bit too big so that it wouldn't actually go in yet, to give us a little bit of leeway. So today it's going to be trimming that down, planing that down so that it fits into the hole, and then trying to finesse that joint so the neck fits onto the body. Now for planing these shoulders down, I've got one of these, and it's actually a really cheap Japanese style plane. So it's just got a thin blade, but the thing is the blade goes all the way across, which means I can cut into these corners and actually start to bring that down all the way across. Now with a Japanese one, you tend to use them backwards, apparently. So I should be able to just come backwards across here and start to take that off. To be honest, being used to normal tools, it feels like forwards is easier, but who am I to question? So we can start to bring that down now towards the line. So it's taken a little while. I've been thinning down and thinning down just with that plane, little block plane, and also that plane that goes to the edge, and very carefully I've been definitely trying to keep it square, trying to keep it parallel here, just very slowly, and it's now got to the point where it fits in, but you see it's quite a tight fit. So that's ready for the next phase. Obviously this bit's too long, which is good, so that needs to be trimmed, and also it's got rounded edges. So there's a gap here and a gap here. Main thing is it needs to be good here. Doesn't matter so much if there's a gap here when we finish, but it needs to be here. So we now can start thinking about, in fact this little block's in the way as well, so I'm going to remove that. Okay, ready for the next stage. Now whilst I've been doing it, I've also been checking with a straight edge along here, so putting it parallel with the central truss rod, which should be parallel with the neck, just to check that it's parallel with this line down the middle, so that I know that it's not skewed in that way. And this is the only opportunity to do that, really, because once it fits. So if you find that as you're paring it down it's slightly twisted, it's possible to take maybe a little bit off the corner and a little bit off the heel there, and as you do it, you just bring it round. That's the point where you adjust the left and right, if you like. That one's good. It goes all the way down. You can see it's reasonably tight in the hole as well. So next thing is to start to bring it in. So obviously it's proud because it's on the bottom there, so I need to chop some off the bottom, but also I need to round these corners a little bit so I can bring in this heel here to start to look more like it's touching. So that's the next bit. Now I've pushed it down, I've slightly rounded off the corners to bring it forward a bit, so it's almost touching now here, and I've pushed it down. I can tell that it's on the bottom, it's touching that bottom section. You can tell because it's flat and it's sitting there as we designed it. So obviously the neck needs to tilt back based on these angles, but first of all I need to remove some of the bottom, some of the underneath part, so that it sits down flat against the body. Now the way I'm going to do that is to start off by simply measuring how far it's sticking up. And in this case it looks like 7.2 mil on that side, 7.5 mil on that side, so it's a little bit different. So then let's measure the thickness that I've actually got here as well. So that's looking like pretty much 40.00 something, and that's 40.00 something. So if I do 40 minus 7.4 and set at my marking gauge to that, I can then mark that off just in this corner where it needs to be cut on both sides, so it's parallel. So that's the gauge set, and then the measurements from the top, and I can just carefully mark on there and on the other side. And then I know if I draw a line here that they're going to be the same depth on both sides. So now that those marks are in, I've gone over it a little bit in pencil to make it more obvious. What I can do is square it across from this angle. So this angle, remember, I cut fairly accurately, and it's going to be at a right angle to that. So all I need to do is put one of these on the right way around, and I can then take my pencil and I can draw that line on like that. With those lines drawn on, I can now take my saw again, carefully cut along the line. I'll cut down first and then I'll cut along. So with a bit more messing about, a bit more just painstaking work with the little plane, that's now pretty close. It's still got maybe 0.5 millimetre, maybe slightly more there, and obviously it's not quite fitted perfectly down the sides, but that's basically it in place. It's going to go forwards very slightly when I trim it, and that should take up some of the gap that I've got left here. The gap here doesn't matter too much as long as it matches at the back where it can be seen. That's the main thing. So now that most of this is done, it basically fits. It's going to need trimming, obviously. It's time to cut down the sides. So I've finished with all the marking out and things that I'm going to be doing on here. So I've already marked out the actual size of the fretboard, and I'm going to cut that out. So I'm just going to go to the bandsaw, cut along these lines to make this a little bit thinner. I'm going to leave it a good 5 mil because I won't finish bringing that to shape until I put the actual fretboard on. So over to the bandsaw. There we are, something that looks a lot more like a guitar neck. So now that it's in place, I start to feel that things are not quite as good as I'd hoped, because now, and you don't really know this until you push it right down to the bottom, I've got very little step here at all, but here I've got maybe not quite a millimetre, but certainly a step. So the whole thing is twisted slightly that way, and I can confirm that if I just get a ruler, put the ruler on. So if we look at the right angle, you can see that there is a slight tilt in that direction if you compare it to the body of the guitar. It's quite hard to see, but you can see that side and that side. See, there's a slight tilt on there. So what I need to do is bring this that way, twist the whole thing that way. So obviously while I've been sawing this end bit, I've just got a slight fraction of a millimetre out, and it's just enough to cause it to get that twist. I need to set that twist out. And there's going to be 2 steps. I'm going to take a little bit off the bottom because I need to twist that way. So I need to chop very small amounts off this bottom corner here so that will actually pivot in the hole. Once I get it so that I can pivot it and get it to the right place exactly, and just by taking a fraction off, I will then glue a very thin shim on this side and then simply plane that down until it fits back into the hole again when it's twisted. So that should work. So the first thing is to take a little bit off the bottom here, just a fraction, and then we'll keep doing that until I can just twist it and it sits flat. I've just taken a little block plane again. I can just take just a little skim off. And then we'll try it back in the hole, and we'll keep doing that until I get enough twist on it that it flattens it. And there we are. I can put the neck in, it's as it was, and then I can give it a twist, and I can now feel that down. So both of these are now smooth and flat. So that's taken enough off the inside. Now I need to add a little bit onto the bottom of the other one to bring that in. So I've made a little shim, and all I'm going to do now is glue that onto the bottom there. It can be quite big, doesn't matter, because I'm going to plane it down again. So I might trim a little bit off the end as well, and I'm just going to use some aliphatic, glue that onto there, put some clamps on it, leave it to set overnight, and then I'll plane that down. And in theory it will still be a tight fit in the hole, but it'll be that twisted slightly back. So now it's the next day. I can tip these off and see what we've got. Okay, it's very much thicker than it needs to be, but I should plane that down. And as I plane it down, I will also take a little bit off the bottom as well, because obviously as I'm twisting it, that's going to push against the bottom, just to make sure. And as we get closer, I can start trying it now in the hole. And basically, because I've already trimmed away this bottom bit, I just need to bring this in until it just goes in. And I can see just by looking here, it just still needs a little bit trimming off this back edge. So I'll just keep going, making it thinner and thinner, slowly, until it fits back in the hole. So I find that doing the final fine fitting of the neck is much easier if you've got the guitar vertical. So I've got it in my workmate, but I don't want to squeeze it in the workmate tight enough to hold it, because that's going to damage it. So what I do is get a towel, G-clamp it on here, G-clamp it on the other side, so that it forms like a little cradle, if you like. Guitar then sits in it, so this is quite loose, and you can then do it up just enough to hold the guitar firm, so you've got a good working platform. Now looking at this one, it's pretty good on that side. I don't know if you can quite see it, but on this side I've got a whacking great gap. So what I'm going to have to do is bring it down. Now I've measured across from here to here, and that's pretty square and pretty level with the guitar. So the problem lies here in the neck. So this is obviously just a fraction of a millimetre too long, so I need to get that, file that down slightly, and that will bring this whole thing slightly forward, because I've also got a whacking great gap here. That's not too much of a problem, but bringing this down will close that gap as well. So now that with my file, I've taken a little bit off this, and lo and behold, I've got a gap all the way around now. So something else is stopping it, and I suspect it's this end here that's stopping it. So if I might have to get some feeder gauges, find out which bit's actually stopping it. Okay, and feeling around with the feeler gauges, I'm feeling a gap all the way around, except for when I push it in the front here, and at the bottom it's digging in. So that's the problem, and it's because I haven't really considered that yet. So this piece here, I can put it in shot, this piece here is still flat across the end, and actually it should be slightly tilted back at this angle, so I'll just have to trim a bit off that front corner. Okay, so I've taken a little bit off the bottom of this, and in fact this has pushed it down a lot, so it's now sitting on this rim again, but there's still a fair gap on this side that I can get a feeler gauge into. So it's tighter than it was, so I need to take a little bit more off here, and I think it's also just catching at the back. I don't think it's completely flat across the back. So what I'm going to do is just flatten that and make sure that's completely flat, and then I'm going to flatten the back of here as well. So there we are, my suspicions are correct. This has got quite a wobble on it, so I just need to flatten that as well. Just taking a file, just carefully taking that out. And there we go, that's now absolutely solid, so that's nice and flat. So now let's turn our attention to the stick again. And again, I can go around with the feeler gauge, and it's tightish in there and completely touching here and along the back, so that's where I need to take some out. So this is getting a lot closer now, so I'm down to one of the thinnest feeler gauges, and I can see that that's quite tight all along there. It's quite tight here, and there's a little bit around the back, so that's starting to get closer. So now just very, very carefully I'm going to bring it down very, very slightly more until those are all completely tight. I'm fairly happy where that's sitting now. So I've got the thinnest feeler gauge. It does go in places, but generally that's pretty tight all the way around. So I think I'm happy with that. So the next stage is to think about this bit. There's obviously a bit sticking out here. So what I'm going to do, take a pencil. I'm just going to run it along the back there to give me an idea of how much of this I need to chop off, and you can see it's not a great deal. There we are. I just topped that off with a 10-end saw, so it's not completely down, just to still give me a little bit of leeway. There's a few mil in it, but it's much closer, so I can now inspect around the joint and see that pretty much I'm happy with that joint now. Now we can think about the next steps. So first of all, I'm going to do a bit of shaping on this heel. But doing that shaping of the heel is going to be, I think, for the next episode. We've already done quite a lot this episode, fitting that neck perfectly in. So hopefully that was useful. Hopefully it was interesting. Press like if you liked it. Feel free to subscribe, and maybe I'll see you next time.